What's the worst defense you've seen someone make in a court? Judge, why are you late? Defendant: my mama didn't wake me up. Judge, how old are you? Defendant: 42. A guy was in court for a DUI. And he insisted on taking the stand when his lawyer advised him not to. Turned out he wanted the judge to know the cop who arrested him was just some rude kid trying to be a big shot, and he wasn't even drunk. He'd only had 2 bottles of wine with dinner. His lawyer interrupted him to try to get him to stop talking, and he told his lawyer to shut up. Then the judge advised him to listen to his lawyer. And he told the judge, I'm not a damn child. Don't interrupt me, and the judge just smiled. And sat back and said, please proceed. We all knew it was over for this guy. He got maxed on the charge. And advised in the future if he was going to pay for a lawyer, he should listen to him. I was the bailiff on a kidnap rape case. The defendant was proper, acting as his own attorney. During jury selection he had the option to wear civilian clothing instead of his jail clothes. He chose to remain in his jail attire, complete with handcuffs and waist restraints. It came time for him to cross-examine the victim. Understandably, she was very upset before he even started. She was crying and refused to look at him. The defendant's first question went like this: you seem upset. Does it make you nervous to be questioned by the person that arped you? You could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. He was found guilty and sentenced to 46 years to life in prison. Edit. Several question about the defendant's motivation about asking that question. He was big guy, but definitely not the sharpest knife in the drawer. My personal take was he tried to ask, be questioned by the person you said accused arped you? And flubbed it. I was talking to a seasoned defense attorney about this story and some others. His take on it was some defendants, for whatever reason, commit suicide by court. I knew a guy that was charged with pimping a 17-year-old girl. Mind you, he didn't tell anyone he knew she was 17. I won't get into the morality of pimping because that's another subject entirely. But his defense was that he wasn't a pimp. He was a rapper and a drug dealer. Like, why the FCK would you admit to being a drug dealer? They threw the book at his ass with like 20-26 years. New law for pimping minors. Statutory rape. Etc. Semicolon. Edit. He actually was a drug dealer too. So maybe he thought it would work? Lol. But they clearly had recordings of him from jail where he was talking to this girl and outing himself like an idiot. I only hit him. He fell off the building himself. A stupid person who Spartan kicked my uncle off a high school building. Story from driver's ed. Guy was in court for killing 2 relatively young gals while drunk. Defendant lawyer claimed that the young girls should be at fault because this man was drunk and the girl was sober. She should have had the reaction time to get out of the way. Pretty stupid defense. But in terms of the worst defense, nothing beats that. I gave testimony as a health professional in a child custody case. The mother wanted to revoke the father's joint physical custody of the 8-year-old girl. The issue was that girl was asked to wipe her father's butt, apply lotion, and wash his genitals. The father's case was that because he was obese, fatigued, suffering from frequent diarrhea, and taxed to take care of his own hygiene without assistance, it was acceptable for her to do this as long as she wore gloves to avoid contracting hepatitis C from him. He also argued that it taught her a lesson about compassion and caring for those unable to do so themselves, and helped them to bond. Truly incredible. I knew a guy who said that the police who responded to the domestic that he had perpetrated had no right to charge him with meth possession since the meth was so pure. No one could have seen it. I had a guy come into my jail with a robbery charge. He tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding because he just took a girl's money and kept the weed he was supposed to buy her for himself, so at most he was just a shitty boyfriend. He made his situation worse by throwing in, "Did she tell you we're F-king? She was underage." Aggravated criminal sodomy. The defense attorney said the RP only lasted for a minute. Edit. During closing argument to the jury, It says here you were drinking and driving, Judge. No sir. Of course his DNA, semen, was in the alley behind his apartment, where a sexual assault took place. Where else would you expect to find your DNA except where you lived? A domestic abuse case. The husband was the accused. The couple was in their late 70s or early 80s. When asked if he did indeed abuse his wife, the husband started complaining that some 40 years ago the wife pretended to be ill and he had to do the laundry all by himself. As if he expected the judge to just go, "Oh, okay. I guess that's cool then." You see, the real victim of everything is me. That's why I need to beat up the bitch every single day, and it's so hard. Wasn't legit caught. Just caught to change my last name. I was 14 and wanted to change my last name to my stepdad's. My biological father had to be present for the appointment and sign off on it. It went something like this. Judge, okay, if everyone will sign here your name will be changed. Bio dad. I'm not signing. Judge, why not? Bio dad. What if she gets pregnant out of wedlock? I want the baby to have my last name. Semicolon. Reminder that I was 14 years old. Had never even kissed a boy. And I hadn't spoken to my dad in at least 5 years. The judge told him that was an irrelevant point and convinced him to sign the paper. I was glad to leave that part of my life behind me that day. My sister told the judge that the light wasn't that red. It was Independence Day, Your Honor. A day to celebrate the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for. A day to celebrate what this country is. So yes. Judge, I did do some meth. For freedom. This was in a drug treatment court. Edit. Stop encouraging him. TBH, the judge chuckled and just said, "Don't be stupid." Then the next 5 defendants tried the same thing and the judge threw the book progressively harder. Key here is, I took a guy to small claims court. His defense was I didn't have the product, so I couldn't ship it to him. Obviously. The judge was like, "But you took his money?" The guy. Yay. So I could buy the product and ship it to him. Judge. Did you do that? Guy. Not yet. Judge. Do you have his money? Guy. No. I had an emergency and had to spend it. That was that. I won. Edit. Someone gave me gold. Thanks. This was a very stressful period of my life. I never touched my daughters. I never hurt my daughters. Never would I sexually abuse my daughters. Except that one time at the cabin. The guy became an instant meme in our country language. I overheard this guy tell the officer that yes, his car license is suspended, but I don't remember the correct terminology, the driving truck one isn't and neither is his motor license. 3 people and the judge tried to explain that a suspended license means he's lost his privilege to drive in general and altogether. He kept fighting it and saying he wasn't fixing anything cause he's now driving a moped and that license is still okay. Not a lawyer. But this story comes from a cop. So, they got a call about a guy having sex with a girl in his van. They show up and arrest the guy. He's 20. The girl is 12. And they arrest him. His defense is, "But she told me she was 14. Edit. For clarification. This was in Southern California about 7 years ago. Legal age of consent was 15, I believe. So, 14. Still illegal. Was sitting in court for traffic violation. The guy in front of me had a speeding ticket. To fight it, he pulled out a large stack of papers. About 3/4 of an inch thick. The stack of papers was a law he pulled out from the 1990s from a different country. The poor judge had to read through. Was in court for a traffic violation in the state of Florida. I'm sitting with a room full of people who are also contesting their tickets. There was a lady who looked like she was a waitress who got up to make her case in front of the judge. She point blank told the judge in front of the officer that ticketed her that her violation was bullshit from a know-it-all cop. The judge then questioned the officer. Your Honor, the defendant's car was going 75 and 35 and ran several stoplights. The judge then proceeded to ask why those charges were unreasonable. Her answer was parody level. I was drinking last night and woke up late. I couldn't lose another job, so I needed to be on time. She ended up paying $500 for wasting the judge's time in addition to her tickets. Hands down, it's a tie between every sovereign citizen I've seen in court for a simple traffic violation like displaying expired plates or not registering a vehicle. The defense is always a stupid variation of "this court doesn't have jurisdiction because the wrong flag is displayed in the courtroom." No. You see, Your Honor, I wasn't driving my car. I was traveling with my vehicle. You have no authority over me because according to maritime law, my body is a sea traveling vessel. I defended a guy on a DUI that jumped into the backseat after he got pulled over and claimed someone else was driving. He was the only one in the car. I watched a friend try a DWI case. Her client testified that she wasn't drunk while driving, and therefore not guilty, because she was actually high on meth at the time. My friend put her head down and started hitting her head against the desk. My rapist's lawyer tried to argue that I wanted it. I was 8 when I was assaulted and had no idea what was going on or what he was doing. Judge, why do you think showing up to this young lady's home unannounced, after she has made it clear to you she is not romantically interested in you, was an acceptable thing to do? Guy I was getting a restraining order against. I just wanted to lick the inside of our dog's mouth. There's lots of backstory to this, but let's just say I had a very creepy stalker. Edit. Thank you everybody for the love and support. Also, thank you to whoever so generously gave me a silver and platinum. You made my week. In my law graduation I was working as a trainee for the college. Lawyer assistant. And I honestly saw that scene. Judge, where were you on Tuesday 11:00 p.m? Accused. I was working in the street selling pot. Judge, you were doing what? Accused. Selling pot. The lawyer looked to him like, WTF. I saw this go down while waiting for my traffic ticket. Judge, so you were seen pulling a stop sign out of the ground and throwing it in the river. Accused. Yes, sir. J. Were you drunk? A. No, sir. J. The ticket says you were intoxicated. A. No, sir. J. Okay. Let's say I believe you. I will throw out this drunken disorderly charge. A. Thank you, sir. J. But I will have to charge you with the destruction of government property and endangering the public. That comes with at least a year in jail. So I'll ask one more time. Were you drunk? A. Yes, sir. Very drunk, sir. Ted Bundy jumping out of the courthouse window and running probably didn't do much to convince people he was innocent. Best defense is a good offense. He was just trying to run it in for a touchdown on 4th down. I was in traffic court and the first guy to go before the judge got pulled over doing some crazy speed. Like 140 miles per hour. The judge essentially told the guy to say he wouldn't ever do it again and that it was a mistake. And in return, the judge would drop the ticket fee and the points on his record. The guy countered with, "Well, I drive that fast all the time, so I'm really good at it. And I don't think it was dangerous at all because of how good of a driver I am." Guy could have walked out totally free, but instead got a $2,500 FNE and 2 points on his record. Reminds me of a story about Butch Cassidy, the famous robber in the Old West. He was captured in Wyoming and brought before a judge. The judge said that he would let him go if he promised never to break the law again. Cassidy said that he couldn't do that, but he would promise never to break the law in Wyoming. And the judge took that deal and Cassidy lived up to it. Anytime his gang planned a job in Wyoming he opted out. Zool assault trial we had this past summer. Guy brutally uphead a woman in a park. Then took her bike and ATM card. A few minutes later he is recorded withdrawing $80 from her account. He is arrested within hours of the assault. At trial, he testified that the sex was consensual and the victim enjoyed performing oral on him so much that she gave him the bike and ATM card to show her appreciation, and that someone else came along and beat her after he left. He also practiced his planned testimony with an inmate who had just been sentenced on a gun charge and bragged about the assault in detail. That inmate threw him under the bus and testified against him. Gun charge inmate freely admitted he hoped rapist would wind up in the same prison he did so he could hand out some backyard justice. Running dope and guns was one thing, but he couldn't tolerate someone touching a woman. It didn't take long for a guilty verdict and life sentence. I'm a reporter and I covered my first murder trial a few months ago. The defendant was a father who had been accused of shooting his 22-year-old daughter in the face. The father verified that the only people in the house at the time of the murder were him and his daughter. The defense obviously didn't have a lot to work with. But one of their arguments was the defendant couldn't have done this because the gun that was used isn't even a man's gun. Needless to say, the dude was found guilty. Edit. I found the girl dead before I RP'd her. I'm no expert, but I would guess that the sentences for defiling a corpse are probably less than murder and RP, so maybe not the worst in that sense. My ex tried the I didn't do it defense during the restraining order hearing. The judge looked at him, already annoyed by him being late. Said, "You're telling me you did not do the crime you confessed to the responding officer and plead guilty to 3 weeks ago? Honestly, if it wasn't a shout to deal with, it would have been hilarious." I was a juror on a DUI case. The driver had drank 6 vodka tonics and 3 beers in about 3 hours. His lawyer tried to argue that electronic interference is what caused him to fail the breathalyzer test. I was sitting on a jury for a case of reckless endangerment, or reckless driving, or both. Anyway, the defense was, it's not illegal, because he didn't mean to. He was FK'd up on pills. I seriously hope that guy got an appeal for bad counsel. I only sexually assaulted her to make her feel more confident about her body as she was a big woman. Paul Gascoigne, ex-professional footballer. I went to court because my next door neighbor tried to drive drunk, and when his truck wouldn't move, he got so angry that he threw several of the complex's large 6 landscaping rocks through the windshield. One missed and hit my car, leaving a large dent on the hood, several scrapes, and about $1,000 in damage. He then moved his truck a few spaces over, leaving a truck-shaped hole in the glass that was all over the ground next to my car. The rocks were still in his cab. The other rock was still on my hood. I called the police, and this 32-year-old man, had his mom lie to the cops for him. For some reason, they found my story more plausible. At court, he showed up drunk. His lawyer asked for a delay, and the judge approved it, and promptly recused himself, as he himself had represented this man 15+ years earlier. I was high. As part of my university course, I had to sit in on a court case and create a court report. I turned up on a random day and asked to enter for my course, and they allowed it. Turned out I was in a hearing about a man who was sexually abusing his stepdaughter and her friends. A key piece of evidence was a photo of his daughter tied to her bed and stripped. It was very obviously her. Her full face was in view, and she also had a very recognizable and undeniable birthmark on her jaw. The man's defense was that this couldn't have been taken by him as he didn't recognize the girl in the photo. Judge damn near laughed at him there in the courtroom. He shot the guy, admitted to shooting the guy, but said the police framed him for murder. He was defending himself and kicked off the trial by singing the Star-Spangled Banner and had to be taken out of the courtroom. Some guy sang a song about how sorry he was. It was honestly beautiful. He still killed a kid. Dumbus got life in prison. Mine is sort of a worst best defense sort of scenario. A few years ago I was doing jury duty at Crown Court in the Old Bailey. It was to judge this gang violence case against a Sri Lankan gang in London. Essentially someone had gotten attacked with a machete in a car park and left for dead. There were 6 suspects in this trial, 2 of which had left the country. What was very clear was that all 6 of these people were in complete cahoots. Every one of these 4 came to trial and blamed one other. So no one got blamed twice. But every one of them got the blame placed on them. Most of the evidence pointed to one of the guys in the trial, or one of the guys that had left the country. We had to vote not guilty because there was so much reasonable doubt against all of them that none of them could be prosecuted. So they essentially all got let off because they all collaborated and lied really well. When my cousin was on a jury for a domestic case, the woman was put in the hospital by her boyfriend. She was in a coma for 18 months and couldn't even appear in court. Apparently the guy pushed her through a door and down the stairs. The guy's defense lawyer was actually trying to get him off with a lighter sentence, but then the guy opened his mouth and tried using the defense of if she would have just listened to me about not touching my gun I wouldn't have gotten so mad. I didn't think the push was strong enough to put her through the door. I didn't mean to put her in a coma. It just happens. When my cousin told me this I couldn't believe it. He ended up spending 3 years in jail and is no longer allowed to possess weapons. He was deemed mentally incapable of handling such things.